Hey, it's John. Welcome back to the show. And welcome back to the latest edition of Latter Day Albums. The premise of this series is to talk about a album that is a Latter Day album by a artist or band that doesn't get a lot of love or recognition, doesn't get a lot of discussion. Before we discuss the album, let me introduce you to my distinguished guest. You no doubt know him from his work on the Contrarians. This is where my guest and I met. He also had a wonderful YouTube channel called Ryan's Vinyl Destination. He also has made appearances on other YouTube channels you know and love, like Grant's Rock Warehouse, Rock Daydream Nation, and you may also know him as a musician and a producer. Ryan Gavalier, my friend, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Looking
Got
forward
it.
to talking about this.
Excellent, as am I. So, Ryan and I are going to discuss Miles Davis's 1986 album, Tutu. This was released on September 29, 1986, on Warner Brothers Records. The album's called Tutu because it's a tribute to Archbishop Desmond Tutu. This album would win the Best Jazz Instrumental Performance by a Soloist Grammy in 1986. At a time when we were going very much into smooth jazz in the 1980s, when you think 1980s jazz, a lot of people think on a popularity standpoint, Kenny G. Here, Miles, along more so Marcus Miller, are going in a different direction with jazz. This album hit number 141 on the Billboard Top 200 album charts, and it went gold in France. The musicians on this album, and there are several. First off, Marcus Miller wrote nearly the entire album. There's one song that he co-wrote with Miles Davis, and there's one song by George Duke, and one song that is a cover of a very popular song from 1985 called Perfect Way by Scritti Politti. Musicians on the album in varying degrees are Miles Davis, Marcus Miller, Jason Miles, Paulinho de Costa, Bernard Wright, Omar Hakim, Adam Holtzman, Steve Reed, George Duke, and Michael Urbaniak. This was produced by Marcus Miller and Tony LaPuma. And Backyard Ritual was written by George Duke and Tony LaPuma. I should actually, that was who produced the song. George Duke wrote Backyard Ritual. So before we get started, Ryan, when did you first get into Miles Davis's music?
I would probably say early college, so around like around 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like I got introduced with like kind of Blue and some of the more popular albums like that. Um, Pretty soon I had got into more of his like fusion stuff like Bitches Brew, On the Corner, um, In a Silent Way, etc. I've heard the vast majority of his albums over time, and honestly, I enjoy all eras for different reasons. Let's say I probably prefer his stuff in like the late 50s to like mid 60s, and then his stuff from like late 60s to like the mid 70s the most, I would say.
Okay. Okay, we're similar in that aspect as far as what we like the most. I got into his music in 2000. Why 2000? I was taking classical piano lessons and I was interested in discovering jazz. and I was talking to my piano instructor, Monica, at the time. Monica, if you're watching, hello. She said, well, if you want to listen to great jazz, you got to listen to WRTI, which is out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's Temple University's radio station. They play classical music all day and they play jazz at night. She said, this is where you got to go. You'll hear a lot of great jazz music here. That's when I found Miles. And my first was my first was Kind of Blue, like a lot of us. My
Mhm.
second was Bitches Brew. My third was Birth of the Cool, but it was the complete Birth of the Cool collection.
Mm.
And then from there, I expanded. I was buying so much Miles Davis music between BMG Music Service and Amazon. It was crazy. I listened to more Miles Davis in the 2000s than any other artist, to the point where I went back to college late. So I didn't, like, after I graduated high school in 89, it took a bunch of years off. I went back to college later, going a little bit at a time, and I was always working full time. I took accelerated courses at College Misericordia between 2003 and 2006. And you had to take art classes. So what I did for my art classes, what I talked about performing arts. So for my one final for performing arts, I did a presentation about Herbie Hancock.
Nice.
Yeah. When I did my last presentation ever, which was for an art class, Brian Benedetti, hello, if you're watching, he was my instructor. I did Miles Davis. And it went like, we were supposed to go 20, 25 minutes. I went 45 minutes. I just was on a effing roll. I was just going and going to the point where Brian said, boy, you're covering everything, aren't you? But it was my last presentation. And I remember bowing at the end, everybody standing and applauding, which was awesome. I remember the last song I talked about by Miles was Time After Time, which was the Cyndi Lauper song that he covered. But I
Mhm.
started from Birth of the Cool and I worked my way up. Tutu, I bought a little bit later. I think I got this maybe 2010. I think it was part of a 3 CD set. I know Amandla was in it. Oh, and Dupop was in it. Those were the CDs that were in it. Those
Nice.
CDs I like. This one I like more than those two.
Mhm.
We're talking about 1980s Miles here. And this is a different Miles as we're going to go into. So, anyway, there's my spiel on Miles Davis. It was to the point, Ryan, in the 2000s, I was writing reviews for Amazon back when Amazon wasn't the huge monopoly it is now,
Mhm.
right? And you can write these album reviews, and I would go deep into these albums and I would write these nice reviews, and it helped me a lot that I was writing a lot for school.
Mhm.
And I reviewed a ton of Miles Davis albums. So if you go on Amazon, ladies and gentlemen, and you see a Miles Davis review or an album review by John Alpick, that's me. So I was reviewing them. And the thing was, back then, you could get so much music for dirt cheap. So, I mean, I was getting these CD back then. They would buy in quantities. You'd buy those CDs for $6. You get all these CDs for dirt cheap. I mean, between them and BMG, I was buying a lot of CDs. Not not as much at Gallery of Sound back in the day. I will tell you that right now, because their prices were just, they were so much higher that it was just better to go to Amazon. Eventually, all their prices became the same, and then I went back to going to Gallery of Sound again. But if there's a big difference, then I'm just going to go with Amazon. Just
Mhm.
straight up, guy. Just being honest there. But I bought a lot from BMG because I had those codes on them on the back that always started with a D and then 6 numbers. I got like a whole bunch of Miles Davis CDs that are like that. But anyway, I'm going off track here. So we're going to talk about Tutu by Miles Davis. And as we indicated, Marcus Miller wrote and did most of the playing and the instrumentation on this album. A lot of guests that I talked about were only playing on 1 or 2 tracks at a time.
Mhm.
So, Ryan, what do you think are the highlights of this album? What are the songs that really stick out to you?
I would say some of the highlights for me are Portia.
Okay.
Backyard Ritual is my
Mhm.
favorite track on the album. Don't Lose Your Mind. I would say Full Nelson. I really like a lot.
Okay.
Um, those are probably my highlights.
Okay. Well, we agree on Don't Lose Your Mind. I love the title song. The title song's been covered by some jazz artists. And Splash, I like a lot too, even though I call it Cosby Show jazz. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like something that would be playing on the Cosby Show. And just to let you all know, a little piece of trivia for all of you out there. If you watched the Cosby Show back in the day, you know, in Theo's bedroom, there was a poster of Miles Davis. That was the cover of the Decoy album. Just to
Mhm.
let you know that. But I didn't know that at the time. I learned that many, many years later. But I like most of the songs on here. There is a little bit of sameness at time in the grooves, but there's a lot of creativity as well on this album.
I agree.
What do you like about those tracks that you mentioned to me?
I think the things that I like, especially about like Don't Lose Your Mind, Portia, Backyard Ritual, I think on those tracks, I like that they have a bit more of an ethereal feel, a little bit more synthesizer on them and stuff like that. Cause I think like the pad synths and stuff add a really great atmosphere on this album.
Mhm.
And I think they complement Miles's playing. Cause honestly, he plays like crazy on this album. I think that in terms of performances, I think this is like one of his more aggressive trumpet performances. Like he's just all over the place on this album. Um, and I think that those kind of tracks, they're a bit more emotional feeling, which I think complements his playing really well on it. So I would say some of the other tracks, which I generally like all the songs on here, or at least I enjoy them. But I think some of the tracks that are a bit more like bass heavy, even though the bass playing is fantastic on them, I think at times it feels more like he's playing trumpet to a backing track,
Okay.
um, rather than him being like cohesive with the whole group. I kind of feel a little more chemistry on some of the more like atmospheric tracks.
So you're saying it sounds like on the songs that are a little more bass heavy, a little more kinetic, that he sounds more like a guest on his own
Mhm.
album. Okay.
Yeah, like some of them it feels like Marcus Miller featuring Miles Davis.
Right. Like, okay, like an example would be, although these albums were, well, the first one was hugely successful, like Santana's Supernatural.
Hmm.
Like I think on like Supernatural Shaman and All That I Am, it at many times it sounds like it's whoever is singing on the song featuring Carlos Santana. A lot of the other songs sound like Santana. The instrumentals sound like Santana. But
Hmm.
I think on a lot of the pop songs, like as much as I adore the song Smooth,
Hmm.
but you know, and it does sound like Santana with some of those drums and congas in there, and the solo is magnificent, but it feels a little more like a Rob Thomas song. It doesn't
Hmm.
sound like Matchbox 20, but it sounds more like a Rob Thomas song because, and he wrote the song, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah. Here, I agree with you. Like a lot of this to me sounds like Marcus Miller featuring Miles Davis, particularly with the keyboards and those very quick bass runs that he would do. He does on a lot of these songs. It's funny though, because a lot of these songs, I what I really like about it is the creativity.
hmm,
Because just when you think it's just going to be this repetitive groove, it's what's going on in the background that makes it more interesting. You got
I agree.
keyboards throwing in these occasional hooks. You hear this really fast bass line there, and then you don't hear it again for like 30 seconds. I think that's what makes it interesting. It doesn't, it never sounds like, well, it very rarely sounds like smooth jazz.
I agree.
Yes,
I agree.
yes. It's definitely more R&B funk,
Hmm.
than it would be smooth jazz. Like smooth jazz, it's just something, the background is usually very simple and plaintive, and it's all about the soloist. Here, there's just a lot more creativity going on, courtesy of Marcus Miller, because he's doing the synth, a lot of synth programming, he's doing the bass, he's doing the bass clarinet, he's doing the production and a lot of other instruments on here. I love the title track because it's a slow groove and it's more atmospheric. That groove is slow, but it brings you in and it really drives the song. I love those occasional bass runs on there. And Miles is like, his playing is like in and out. It's not, it's, it's not, I wouldn't say it's cohesive. It's like he throws in his lines here and then you hear some other instruments bring in atmosphere, and then he comes back in. Although his lines on that track are excellent.
Hmm.
That's what I hear from Tutu. Now, when you mentioned Porsche, yeah, that's more somber,
Hmm.
very reflective early on, has more of a feel with in its presentation, it sounds 80s, but the way it starts out almost like like a track from In a Silent Way, like
Hmm.
like that song, right? So, but then it sounds 80s once the drums really kick in. And I like the call and response between the synth lines from Marcus and Miles's trumpet. So they're bouncing back and forth here. And I know a lot of the brass on here is programmed because there's bass clarinets. Um, it, Marcus's credit on bass clarinet, but you don't hear it too often on this album. A lot of times, when you what you think is a horn is actually a keyboard replicating that horn.
Hmm.
But this is a very good track. What do you think of Perfect Way?
Perfect way. Um, I enjoyed it, but it's not one that was like super, super memorable to me in comparison with the rest of the album. Um, I think that of the tracks that are at the end of the album, it's probably the one that I could like pick out the least about. Like I feel like Don't Lose Your Mind, Full Nelson, Backyard Ritual. I have more to say about all those ones, but that one kind of just
Okay, well, let's just bang that one out of the way. Well, before we bang it out, did you ever hear the original by Scritti Politti, the pop hit? It was in '85.
I honestly am not sure on that.
Okay, okay. It was a great synth pop song. It was a top 20 hit here in the United States. It in the United States, Scritti Politti are a one hit wonder, but what a hit it was! It's a great song. It's too close. It almost sounds like Scritti Politti's in the studio because 80% of it is sounds just like the hit single. It's just that Miles is playing the vocal lines, the vocal melody on the trumpet. I don't think it just doesn't sound natural to me. All those keyboards in there, the drums, it sounds just like the original song. What was cool about the original track was it had this really cool piano solo that sounded very 60s Motown. It was really cool. Here they try to do this atmospheric drone thing. And not only does it sound dated, it just doesn't work to me. So to me, it's like this is a song they should not have touched. This is the only song on here I don't. anything I enjoy about it is because it sounds like the Scritti Politti version, right?
Mhm.
So to me, yeah, everything else is good or very good. Now, you were mentioning Don't Lose Your Mind. What really comes out to you on that?
Once again, a little bit more of like a somber feel, really good atmosphere to that one. I really like, I think it must be keyboards or something, but like some of the melodies throughout are just real emotional on that one. That's mostly what I like about it. It just has more of like a um emotional feel to it overall.
Do you think those synth lines in there sound like something out of a horror movie from the 80s? Because that's what jumps out at me.
Yeah, I think it definitely does at times. It has like yeah, a little bit of like a haunting, ethereal type of feel to it.
All right, cool. Now, you were mentioning Full Nelson. To me, this sounds like background of a cool 1986 pop song and a presentation, especially. I think this album sounds like it was made in 1986, but when you hear
Mhm.
Full Nelson, it screams 1986,
Yeah,
but not just because of the recording or the production. It's because of the music. It just sounds like the backing track of some pop funk song.
yeah,
Done. Do you agree? You agree with that?
yeah. It's like I feel like it's almost a little bit corny, but it just
Okay.
grooves so hard. Like I like it because it's just like one of those songs that like it does have like a funky feel, and it just like gets me in a good mood. Honestly, I don't know. I think it's a strong closer to the album. I think like maybe tonally it's a little bit off from the rest of the end of the album, but I think it kind of like calls back a little more to like the earlier songs, like the title track or like Splatch or like Tomas, like having a little bit more of like a funky feel to them.
Tomas definitely more of a funky feel. And
Yeah, and I feel oh
I'm sorry.
sorry about that. You can finish what you were saying
Okay, thank
first.
you. You got those guitar lines on here. I don't know if those are real guitar lines or if they were just made through the synth because I don't see any guitar. I don't see any credits here for guitar on the album, but it's got it has that funk guitar sound to it. But the synth is definitely what's providing the drama on there and definitely the hook.
Hmm.
And you got Omar Hakim on the drums on that as well. Because you got the and I don't know if he's playing organic drums and there's synth drums on there as well, because you heard a steady drum beat and then you hear those program drums they're coming in and out. They're really cool.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely a more upbeat song on there on that track.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to say about a song like that or like Tomas or like the title track, I feel like I agree with you that like the album mostly stays away from doing smooth jazz, but I feel like there's moments in like a lot of the songs that get kind of like very tropey of like 80s jazz or like smooth jazz. It's not like whole songs, but there will be like little moments like where they'll like go into a melody where it's like, oh, this is starting to feel kind of like smooth jazz, or you'll have like on Tomas that guitar line. Um, it almost sounds like it sounds like a sample type of thing, like of like
Yeah.
another 80s like jazz song. So it's like I think that overall there's a lot of moments from like this is a weird album, it's like kind of experimental, but then it like sometimes falls into like a little bit more of like generic tropey kind of like jazz music of the time.
It doesn't ever get that way for a full track, just carrying the rhythm, though. It just comes in there in and out, which
Yeah,
I
like in and out, like a
yeah,
synth hit or like the little guitar lines or things like that where it's just like okay, it's getting into a little bit of the generic territory, but then it goes back into like some more like experimental type of stuff. So it's interesting.
Originally, Prince was supposed to collaborate on this album,
Yes.
but then there was he just didn't have the time to do it. Although Prince and Miles stayed tight.
Hmm.
Do you hear Prince in this album in the rhythm?
There's there was moments throughout it where I was like, oh, this kind of feels like Prince for sure. Um, it would have been interesting to see what he did on it, honestly, but I think they ended up doing something together a little later on, right?
That, I'm not sure.
I
I'm
think they did a track together. If I'm not, I don't remember what the name of it is, but I think they did do
okay.
something.
Okay, because I was big into Prince in the 80s, but there were some albums that I missed. Like I know you're big into Sign of the Times from Prince. I only heard that album maybe once. So I'm not sure if that's where it would have been. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Splatch to me sounds like Prince meets the art of noise.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just I call it Cosby Joe show jazz, but at the same time, it's very pop funk.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I really picked up on here.
Definitely.
So we talked about just about everything on here. Tomas, we said, was very upbeat. And what are your thoughts on the title song?
Title song. Um, I enjoy it. I think that Miles especially has some really good lines on it. Honestly, like after like the dum dum dum, and he'll do like his little lines and stuff. I think the actual groove itself, it's not bad, but I think it does kind of like feel a little generic, honestly. I think like the bass line especially kind of feels a little bit generic, and then you'll have those little like synth hits throughout it and stuff. I would say like I'm still positive on the track, but it's not one of my favorites.
You mentioned Backyard Ritual before as one of your favorites. What really shines for you on that?
It just has a little bit of like a darker type of feel, a lot more synths and stuff on it, very atmospheric. I just feel like it doesn't necessarily fit on the album. Like, I mean, it does, but it doesn't. Like, I think it just comes up, and I think it's maybe partly because it was like different producer, written by George Duke, stuff like that. It does actually feel different. Um, the main thing I love about it is the synths, honestly. I feel like they just really give it some really great texture and just an overall fantastic atmosphere.
Very good. So the thing about this album is, yes, it sounds like of its time, but at the same time, it's quite creative.
Hmm.
So that's what brings you back. Like we were saying off air that we were both listening to this album. We've known this album for a long time, but we are listening to it heavy in the times when we discussed doing it and talking about it now. And it just seems like as time goes on, with each listen, you pick up more and more things. And I think it really, really works well as a piece. Would you agree?
Definitely. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that I've always liked the album, and like I think when we first discussed doing the video and I started listening to it again, I think I was feeling even more positive about the album than I am now. I think after a lot of listens, there's like little things I could like pick apart that maybe I'm not crazy about on it. But I think still the album works very well as a whole. I think that especially, for someone who had such a long career and this being one of his last works, I think it's still very, very strong.
I agree. Of his 80s albums, I'm not high on his 80s and early 90s output studio wise, but this is quite creative.
Hmm.
Most of the time I really dig this album. It's not the first or the 20th album I'm gonna jump to if I'm in the mood for Miles Davis. But I really appreciate what Marcus Miller and Miles and all the other musicians that were involved in this, what they brought to this album. They gave us something that's really creative. I read reviews saying this is the best jazz album of the 80s, or best one of the best jazz albums of the 80s. Other reviews saying it's just too much keyboards, too much synthesizers. It's a Marcus Miller project more than anything else. I kind of agree with that latter statement, but overall, I think it's aged well. Even though it sounds 86, it's something you can go back and listen to and pick things up and really enjoy. Now, is this kind of blue, Birth of the Cool, Miles Smiles, Bitches Brew, and a Silent Wave? Not to my ears. But I do really appreciate what it is, and I think it works really well as a piece, like most Miles Davis albums do.
Hmm.
So, Ryan, how would you rank this on a scale of 1 to 10?
I was thinking about this a lot, and it's honestly it's complicated because I do like the album.
Mhm.
Um, and I think if I was comparing it to other artists, I might give it a little bit higher of a rating.
Okay.
But because of the standard that Miles Davis has set with some of his better albums, like we were talking about, like Nefertiti, Kind of Blue,
Yes.
Kilimanjaro, Earth, the Cool, On the Corner, etc. I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10, honestly.
Okay.
Like I said, if it was against a different artist, I could probably go a little higher, but I just think that like Miles just has albums that are better than this. But at the same time, if I'm in the right mood, this could be an album I would go for, above some of those other ones. Like if I want more of like an 80s feel, because I think that, like we said, it's not perfect, but I think that it is a very interesting part of history and like of 80s jazz. It is one of the better things I've heard, if not like one of the best in general of that era.
Very good. Now, I rank albums similar like you. I compare to another artist's work. I know a lot of people don't rank albums that way. I give this a 7.5. I really appreciate what he did here. What I like about this album, outside of maybe Perfect Way, is that it's not Miles playing it safe. It's
Hmm.
creative. It's not boring.
Hmm.
Miles was reinventing jazz as time went on in the 40s, 50s, 60s, especially the 60s and 70s. Me, it's more Marcus Miller reinventing jazz than Miles, although Miles plays a very key role on here. And his
Hmm.
playing is very expressive compared to some of the earlier 1980s albums. I really enjoy the title song and Splash and Don't Lose Your Mind. I think those are very good songs. I'm not going to say anything's a knockout or anything's great, but I think it works very well as a piece. I think if you grew up in the 80s and you like 80s music to this day, you might dig this.
Hmm.
That's the thing. You might dig it. But I mean, I can see why jazz purists wouldn't care for it, but because they heard all the great timeless Miles Davis albums that are still lauded to this day. Newer music fans, a lot of them like this. And I can understand why. It's not one of my favorite Miles Davis albums, but I like it as a piece. I enjoy it. Even Perfect Way, I mean, they tried to do something different with it. I just don't think it should have been touched. And it's certain, like I said again, it's not safe. So I give it a 7.5. We have discussed Miles Davis's 1986 album, Tutu. So For all of you who've been watching, thank you so much for joining us. What do you think of Miles Davis's music? In particular, what do you think of Tutu, which was one of his last studio recordings? What are your favorite tracks on this album? Do you not like this album at all? You're turned off by the production. You don't like what Miles and Marcus and the other musicians are doing here. Are you a big fan of Miles Davis's music? And what do you think are his finest works and finest compositions? What do you think of his live material? Please let us know in the comments what you think of Miles Davis and this album, Tutu. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about this album that doesn't get enough love, recognition, or discussion. Miles Davis, Tutu.
Absolutely. It was a really good time. I'm glad to have revisited this album, and it made me go back and revisit some other albums in Miles Davis's catalog as well. Made me like have some changed opinions on albums, things like that. So overall, I'm really glad that we did this, and I look forward to doing more stuff with you.
Oh, right back at you, Ryan. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to talk music with you.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
what you got it? What do you have coming up musically, creatively, personally?
Um, Honestly, right now I've been starting to like play some guitar some more and stuff, like just kind of like trying to get some inspiration right now, like with music and things like that. I don't have anything like coming out at the moment or anything. Getting married in a little less than a month now, so um that's been a pretty big focus right now for me, but yeah, we'll see.
Absolutely. And congratulations to you both. I'm
Thank you.
very happy for both of you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You got it, Ryan. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Do what you love, and we'll talk to you soon.